Big Pharma has been under scrutiny during the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent race to develop a vaccine. Since 2016, innovative multinational pharmaceutical companies have invested close to 3 billion rand in research and developmental activities. Sub-Saharan Africa leads the world in innovative public-private partnerships, and the collaboration between South Africa's Biovac Institute and multinational pharmaceutical company Pfizer is just one example of that. We're joined by Innovative Pharmaceutical Association South Africa CEO Bada Pharasi. Mr. Pharasi, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Look, of course, there's been a lot more interest in these public-private partnerships in the pharmaceutical industry than ever before. Let's talk about what you think some of the big successes have been before we get into perhaps some of the more controversial issues.
Good evening, Kathy, and a warm welcome to you in this 2022 year, and a happy new year to you and your viewers and listeners.
Thank you so much for that. Same to you.
Thank you. In terms of what has happened in 2021, I think the biggest event or group of events has been the fact that the pharmaceutical industry in 2021 and 2020 has had to work within what I would say is a timeline that has been incredibly narrow compared to the usual times that are taken to develop vaccines. And the industry has had to come up with the challenge that was faced by the world in terms of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think a lot of good work has been done in that respect, given the number of vaccines that have been developed by the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And in terms of what's happened in South Africa, the fact that we have managed to supply sufficient vaccines to ensure that as many people as the government could get to go to the vaccine sites have been vaccinated.
Of course, when we talk about these partnerships, what has really been revealed during this period is that while the public sector is often roped in to help fund the research for these projects, when it comes to the end product, oftentimes it's the pharmaceuticals that are doing away with, or rather getting away with, the biggest profits. How are you managing that in the Southern African context?
Kathy, I can say without fear of contradiction that even though a lot of clinical trials have happened in South Africa, the clinical trials that have taken place have to a certain extent contributed towards gaining an understanding of the nature of the COVID-19 what do you call it now, the pandemic as a whole and everything that's related to it. But I must say that the South African government had only started contributing towards getting the vaccines into the country when they started purchasing those. None of the clinical trials that happened in South Africa were paid for by the South African government. So this is something that we have to make very, very clear. However, regardless of that, it is important to mention that a lot of research had happened already globally to ensure that there were vaccines that could counter all sorts of viral infections. And this vaccine, by the way, the COVID-19 vaccines, are not necessarily new vaccines. They had already been developed for quite a number of years. And what happened was that when the coronavirus reached the planet and something had to be done, the pharmaceutical industry very quickly garners the whatever they could do to ensure that those research and development products that had been meant in general for viruses could be garnered towards the coronavirus, the COVID-19 vaccine.
Of course, there's also a lot of distrust in the process. People kept asking, and still do to this day, how it is that a vaccine was developed as quickly as it has been. So going forward, do you think, industries like your own will be doing things differently so that ordinary members of the public are able to get a glimpse into the work that you do, and therefore it will be easier to trust the work that's coming out of the pharmaceutical industry?
Yes, Kathy, definitely. As I said, the research and development that had been done into different kinds of viruses, many of them related to the coronavirus, had been going on for many years. And it was simply a matter of having to tweak the ones that had been prepared, developed for quite a number of years, to ensure that they would be able to counter this specific virus known as the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus. It's not as if all the work was started in 2020 when the virus was first discovered. It was simply a matter of tweaking those that had already been developed to ensure that they could be used to counter this virus. So it's not a new thing altogether. And in terms of ensuring that you can trust the pharmaceutical industry to ensure that they contribute towards the nations, including developing nations, accessing the coronavirus vaccines, I can assure you that, and you've mentioned some of the examples, there have been a lot of bilateral licensing agreements that have happened between a lot of our member companies and local companies in South Africa and elsewhere in the developing world. So there is no doubt that the multinational pharmaceutical industry can indeed be trusted to ensure that everybody has access to the vaccines, regardless of whether they are in developing or developed countries.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Bada Pharasi is the CEO of the Innovative Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa.